Well, hello, grandchildren. It's Sunday afternoon. It's about 3:15, and I'm finally getting a little bit of quiet time where I can read part of this book to you. We're reading Charlotte's Web, and this is chapter 5. If you remember last time we read, in chapter 4, Wilbur was feeling very lonesome, and finally a small voice had said something to him. I'll be your friend, and you go to sleep now, and I'll see you in the morning. Well, Wilbur didn't know who that was, but he was thinking about it when he went to sleep. And whoever it was apparently had gone to sleep too. So this is chapter 5, and it's titled Charlotte. The night seemed long, and Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's hard to sleep. A dozen times or so that night, Wilbur woke up and stared into the blackness, listening for sounds, trying to figure out what time it was. A barn is never really perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there's usually something stirring. The first time he woke up, he heard Templeton gnawing at a hole in the grain bin. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite a racket. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying people's property? Why can't he just go to sleep like any decent animal? The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning around on her nest, clucking to herself. What time is it? Whispered Wilbur to the goose. Probably about 11:30, said the goose. Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur? Too many things on my mind, said Wilbur. Well, said the goose, that's not my problem. I have nothing on my mind, but I have too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs? No, replied Wilbur. I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take for goose eggs to hatch? Approximately 30 days, all told, answered the goose. But I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I just put a little straw over the eggs and go out for a walk. Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again this voice. The voice that said, I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning. About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke up and listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless. Even the goose was quiet now. Overhead on the main floor, nothing was stirring. The cows were resting, the horses were dozing, and Templeton had quit working and gone off, somewhere, I guess on an errand or something. The only sound was a slight scraping noise on the rooftop where the weather vane was going back and forth, and Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, quiet and calm and waiting for light. Day is almost here, he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared, and one by one the stars went out, and Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under her wing, and he could see the sheep and the lambs, and the sky was getting lighter and lighter. Oh, beautiful day! Day is here at last. Today I shall find my friend. Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge, and he stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he would just have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of the dawn by using his voice, but he couldn't think of any other way to locate the mysterious new friend who was nowhere to be seen. So Wilbur cleared his throat. Attention, please, he said in a loud, firm voice. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make himself or herself known by giving an appropriate sign and or signal? Wilbur paused and he listened. All the other animals lifted their heads. They stared at him. Wilbur blushed. He was determined to get in touch with his new unknown friend. Attention, please, he said. I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me where you are, if you are in fact my friend. The sheep looked at each other in disgust. Stop your nonsense, Wilbur, said the oldest sheep. If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest, and the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody in the morning before he is ready to be waked. How can you be sure your friend is an early riser? I beg everyone's pardon, whispered Wilbur. I didn't mean to be objectionable. He lay down meekly in the manure pile, facing the door. He did not know it, but his friend was very close indeed. The old sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon Louvie appeared with slops for breakfast, and Wilbur rushed out and ate everything in a hurry and licked the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane. The gander waddled along behind them, pulling the grass. And just when Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again that thin voice that had addressed him the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped to his feet. "Salutations?" he cried. "Salutations," repeated the voice. "What are they? Where are you?" Wilbur was confused. Please, tell me where you are, and what are salutations?" "Salutations are greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. Look, I'm waving." At last Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kind way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web, head down, was a very large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of the legs at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. "See me now?" she asked. "Oh, yes." "Yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What is your name, please? May I have your name? Your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" asked Wilbur eagerly. "Charlotte A. Cavactica. But just call me Charlotte." "I think you're beautiful," said Wilbur. "I am pretty," replied Charlotte. "There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm just not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clearly as you can see me." "Why can't you?" asked Wilbur. "I'm right here." "Yes, you are, but I'm nearsighted," replied Charlotte, "and I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways and not so good in other ways. Watch me wrap up this fly, and I'll be right with you." Here's a picture of Charlotte hanging from the web, and Wilbur down there at the bottom of the door frame looking up at her. A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's trough had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web and was tangled in the sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying very hard to loose itself and set itself free. First, said Charlotte, "I'd dive at him." She plunged head first towards the fly, and as she dropped, a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. "Next, I wrap him up." She grabbed the fly and threw a few jets of silk around it and rolled it over and over, wrapping it so that it couldn't move. Wilbur watched all this in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he did feel sorry for this one. "There," said Charlotte. "Now I knock him out, so he'll be more comfortable." She bit the fly, and he can't feel anything at all now, she said. "He'll make a perfect breakfast for me later." "You mean you eat flies?" gasped Wilbur. "Well, certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, choice beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, midgets, daddy longlegs, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything, I guess, that's careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I?" "Well, yes, of course," said Wilbur. "Do they taste good?" "Delicious, of course. I don't really eat them. I drink them. Well, I drink their blood. I love blood," said Charlotte, and her pleasant, thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. "Don't say that," groaned Wilbur. "Please don't say things like that." "Well, why not? It's true." "I have to say what is true, don't I? I am not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or other, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me. Her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers way, way back, I guess thousands of years. We spiders have been laying for flies and bugs, and it's a miserable inheritance," said Wilbur, gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was so bloodthirsty. Yes, it is," agreed Charlotte. "But I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the planet when the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did, and it was clever of her too, and since then all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole, we're trappers. It's cruel, replied Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of his position. Well, you can't talk, said Charlotte. You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living. I live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever, lest I go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes. And it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore, said Charlotte, shaking her leg at him, do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous that they'd destroy the earth, wipe out everything? Really, said Wilbur. I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all. The goose had been listening to all this conversation and clucking to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea. Mr. Zuckerman and Luvie are plotting to kill him. The goose raised herself a bit and poked her egg a little further under her so that her warmth could cover the entire eggs and her feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night, from all the excitement of meeting someone for the first time, and a breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend, all right. But what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, scheming, bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her? Even though she is pretty, and of course she's very clever. Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go along with meeting a new friend for the first time. In good time he would discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her rather bold, cruel exterior, she had a very kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. Chapter 6. The early summer days on the farm are the happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air smell sweet, then they fade, and apple blossoms come along with the lilacs, and they bring the bees that visit around among the apple trees, and the days grow warm and soft. School ends, and the children have time to play and to fish for trout in the brook. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried up for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day. She sat quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the work horses were hitched up to the mowing machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed onto the seat and drove it into the field. All morning long you could hear the rattle and bang and clang of a machine as it went round and round and round and round. While the tall grass all fell down, the cutter bar in long green swaths. Next day, if there was no thunder shower, all hands would be helping to rake, pitch, and load all that hay, and it would be hauled to the barn in the high hay wagon, with Fern and Avery riding on the top of the load. Then the hay would be hoisted, sweet and warm, into the big loft until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was fine to jump in and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay and would add it to the other things of his pocket. Early summer days are like a jubilee time for birds. In fields, around the house, and in the barn, and in the woods, and in the swamp, everywhere, love and songs and nests and eggs were coming. From the edge of the woods, the white-throated sparrow, which must come all the way from Boston, calls, "Peabody, Peabody, Peabody." On an apple bough, the phoebe teeters and wags its tail and says, "Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe." The song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, says, "Sweet, sweet, 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 sweet." If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from their nests and scold, "Chikee, chikee, chikee." In the early summer, there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and suck and chew. Dandelion stems are full of milk. Clover heads are loaded with nectar. The Frigidaire is full of ice-cold drinks. And everywhere you look, life, even the little ball of spit on the weed stalks, if you poke it apart, has a green worm inside of it. And on the underside of the leaf of the potato vine are the bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in early summer that the goose eggs finally hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there, sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know about the goslings and that they had arrived. The goose knew a day in advance that they were coming. She could hear their weak voices calling from inside the egg, and she knew they were in a desperately cramped position inside the egg, inside the shell. They were most anxious to break through and get out. So she sat quite still and talked less than usual. When the first gosling poked its gray-green head through the goose's feathers and looked around, Charlotte was the first to spy it and make the announcement. "I'm sure," she said, "that every one of us here will be grateful to learn that after 4 weeks of unremitting effort and patience on the part of our friend the goose, she has now something to show for it. The goslings have arrived. May I offer my sincere congratulations?" "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you," said the goose, nodding and bowing shamelessly. "Thank you," said the gander. "Congratulations," shouted Wilbur. "How many goslings are there? I only see one." "There are 7, 7, 7, said the goose. "Fine," said Charlotte. "7's a lucky number." "Luck had nothing to do with it," said the goose. "It was good management and hard work." At this point, Templeton showed his nose from his hiding place under Wilbur's trough. He glanced at Fern and then crept cautiously towards the goose, keeping close to the wall. Everyone watched him, for he was not well liked, and he was not trusted. "Look," he began in his sharp voice, "you say you have 7 goslings. There were 8 eggs. What happened to the other egg? Why didn't it hatch?" "It's a dud, I guess," said the goose. "What are you going to do with it?" continued Templeton, his little round beady eyes fixed on the goose. "You can have it," replied the goose. "Roll it away and add it to that nasty collection of yours for all I care." Templeton had a habit of picking up unusual objects around the farm and storing them in his home. He saved everything. "Certainly, said the gander. "You can have the egg. But I'll tell you one thing, Templeton. If I ever catch you poking around your ugly nose around our goslings, I'll give you the worst pounding you ever took." And the gander opened his strong wings and beat the air just to show them his power. And he was strong and brave, and the truth is, both the goose and the gander were a little bit worried about Templeton. With good reason. The rat had no morals, no decency, no milk of rodent kindness, no compunctuations, no higher feelings, no friendliness, no anything. He would kill a gosling if he could get away with it, and the goose knew that. Everybody knew that. Here's a picture of Templeton rolling the egg away, and Fern watching on, and the geese are there. With a broad bill, the goose pushed the unhatched egg out of the nest, and the entire company watched in disgust while the rat rolled it away. Even Wilbur, who could eat almost anything, was appalled. "Imagine wanting a junky old rotten egg," he muttered. "A rat is a rat," said Charlotte. She laughed, a tinkling little laugh. "But, my friends, if that ancient egg ever breaks, this barn will be untenable." "What does that mean?" asked Wilbur. "It means nobody will be able to live here on account of the stink. A rotten egg is a regular stink bomb." "I won't break it," snarled Templeton. "I know what I'm doing. I handle stuff like this all the time." And he disappeared into his tunnel, pushing the goose egg in front of him. He pushed and nudged until he succeeded in rolling it to his lair underneath the trough. And that afternoon, when the wind had died down and the barnyard was quiet and warm, the gray goose led her 7 goslings off their nest and out into the world. Mr. Zuckerman spied them. He came with Wilbur's supper. "Well, hello there," said Mr. Zuckerman, smiling all over. "Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 baby geese. Now isn't that lovely? And that's the end of chapter 6. And we'll start with chapter 7 tomorrow. I hope you've enjoyed reading our story. And it gets, as the plot thickens and things start to happen here, it's going to get much more interesting in the next couple of days. Well, I love you kids. I hope you are worshiping God together on this day. Spend some time together with your families and enjoy what God has in store for you today. The sun's shining here in Oklahoma, and we're happy to be here and be part of your lives, even if it is through a video channel. We love you very much. God bless. Bye.